Welcome to Leadership Mindsets with Catherine Martins. I talk to all kinds of leaders about how they think. It's a chance to broaden our ideas of leadership and hear from leaders about how they successfully inspire and motivate others on a daily basis. We will hear their stories, the joys and triumphs, and the challenges of leadership. It's my hope that as we get an insight behind the scenes of how these leaders think, and as we hear their stories of choosing bravery, humility, morality, that we will all be inspired to reflect a little deeper about the way that we think too. And we'll be challenged to also have a healthy mindset. My guest today is Anna Moss. Anna is the Women's Ministry Facilitator for the Presbyterian Church of New South Wales, and she's also a clinical counsellor working for the Family Systems Practice in Sydney. Welcome, Anna.
Thanks, Catherine, for having me.
Well, I'm just going to say straight up to all our listeners that you and I have been friends for many years. And so I am absolutely delighted to have you on the show. Anna and I first met when we were both working for Anglican Youth Works in ministry, and we just hit it off and we've stayed connected ever since.
Yeah.
Anna and I have both stayed in ministry all these years. How long ago was that, my friend? I think 20
I was in my early 20s, like scarily a long time ago.
Yes.
I think I was only about 23, 24 when we met.
Yes. So that was some time ago.
Now. Yes.
And I think that's testimony, I guess, of the wealth of wisdom of how we've both been in leadership now in different ways for decades, not just years. And so I'm very much looking forward to mining some of that wisdom on behalf of our listeners today. Do you want to just maybe give people a little bit of your background, a little bit of your bio? Just tell us what sort of roles in leadership have you had and what are the ones you're in now like for you?
Sure. So I originally trained, I did a combined degree. I did a social work degree and a law degree. And I didn't really ever go into law as such. I did work in social work areas. So I worked for Anglicare with at-risk families, and I had another role with, working with at-risk adolescents. I also did some theological training part-time, and then I started to work, I worked as a school counsellor in a high school, and then I also worked for, I'm trying to think now, 10 years. 10 years I worked for, Presbyterian Church in Sydney here, worked in ministry there. And then from there, I moved to the role I'm currently in, which I now work as, my role is called Women's Ministry Facilitator with the Presbyterian Church of New South Wales. And I do that part-time, and then I also work as a mental health social worker, which is in private practice counselling, working with individuals and couples and family as well. So in my current ministry role, I do tend to support women who are working in ministry roles in churches, basically looking to support them in their roles, looking at the ways that the denomination as a whole can better support women. We're looking also at seeing how women can be better equipped and trained, how there can be more women recruited for roles. And we're also looking at the ways in which men and women work together in decision-making forums. So that's sort of an advocacy part of the role, really, which is looking at ensuring and seeking to improve the ways in which women are engaged in the decision-making forums of the church. So that's probably, that's where I'm up to at the moment.
Yeah. Firstly, I have to just say how glad I am that there is a role like yours. How did that come about? Because I know that there's a bit of a story to tell there as well, isn't there?
Yeah, so I was working. I was working at a church for quite a number of years, and this role came up as a new role. It hadn't existed previously. So this was back in 2018, and there was a lovely faithful group who had really wanted to see a role like mine become established. They'd really seen a need for it. They'd done a big survey across the state, and they'd really decided that there needed to be someone who was able to be kind of set apart and, I guess, specifically doing this role. So then I heard about the role, and I was really interested because I realised that for me, working as a woman in a church over a long period of time, although I'd had actually in a lot of ways a really good experience, I realised that it was, there was a real gap there in terms of there was no one to actually go to kind of receive, I guess, support in terms of networking further afield. So I really saw the need for that role. So when I heard about that role being established, I was really interested. So I applied for the role and got the role. And even when it started, they didn't even know whether they'd have funding for more than 12 months. But again, that's been really very encouraging aspect that since then the denomination has really seen the value of this role, and now there's much more ongoing funding, and it's become much more an integrated part of the denomination as a whole. So that's been a real process actually of the role being established and recognised and kind of accepted. Really, it's taken a bit of a process for that to happen.
So it's a bit of a pioneering role then, in many ways, since you're the first one to have it.
And there's never been anyone else in the role. So
keep going. It's not like you've got to inherit what to do. You've had to figure it out along the way. I'm sure in the years that you've been laying down the foundations for this role that you've come across some challenges. Can you tell us a story of one of those challenges, how you've overcome it, some of maybe the hard parts, but also the joyous parts of it?
I mean, I certainly think one of the challenging parts of it to begin with was that because it had never existed, there wasn't a really strong support structure around it. So there is a committee who is made up of men and women who, in a sense, I do report to that committee. But in the early days, even just that committee had only just started the year before. It was all very new in terms of how we work together. We're from across the state. So, I think that was one of the biggest initial challenges. And I remember just thinking, goodness, I don't even know if I can continue in this role. I remember just very much on my own. There was no support structure around my role at all. So that was, I guess, for me, a good first opportunity of how do I actually sustain myself in this role. So I guess I had to work pretty hard at how to get my expectations clear about what the committee, what their role was and what their role wasn't. And that's actually been a good process for me of working out how to work with the committee well, but also finding other groups within the denomination that I can also work with. And because certainly my role was very isolated when I started. So that's been a big part of the role, is networking basically and trying to work out who's doing what and who I can partner with.
And what about the external supports, which I'm a great advocate for, and my whole coaching business and supervision business is all about providing that independent external support for people like you and any other person in leadership. Because often it's when you talk to somebody outside of your world, or in this case, your denomination, that you can be so much freer to just say it like it really is and know that there's that 100% confidentiality. Have you got that in your world? Tell us about some of your
so that was one of the good things when my role was set up. Part of the funding was actually to make sure that I could have professional supervision in the role, which has been really good. So I actually have kind of two lots of professional supervision. So I have I guess I would call a ministry mentor or a pastoral supervisor in my ministry role who I meet with. And also actually in my other role in clinical work, I also have clinical supervision. So I've kind of actually got two separate kinds of supervision that I'm a part of. And that makes a really big difference in terms of just being able to reflect on my practice, reflect on my principles, kind of calm myself down when I'm getting, upset and agitated about things. So that's been really useful to me. And I certainly, and I'm actually part of a group now within my role with the Prezzies. We're actually looking at trying to really establish pastoral supervision much more broadly across the denomination, and to really see that culture shift where many, many more people are taking up pastoral supervision. So that's something that has, kind of probably, 10 years ago was pretty bare, pretty
definitely
slim on the ground. So
it's a trend across most of the denominations now, which is great that there's that growing expectation and understanding that anyone in leadership does need that support, and on a regular basis, and professional if possible.
Absolutely.
So that's wonderful to hear that as well.
definitely.
Anna, you've been talking about some pretty challenging roles that you have and your own personal need for support in those. I'm interested, as you've sought that support, how you've gone about just that internal process of resilience and of gathering all of your, I guess, internal resources is the best way I can
Yeah,
describe,
sure.
to cope with some of those really difficult conversations. I
Yeah.
guess there's a lot of people who are listening right now who are women, and many of those are either in leadership or have been in leadership and it hasn't gone well, or they are hoping to be in leadership and they're wondering where they fit as women, either in the business world, but I guess in your context, particularly in the church.
Yeah.
And I imagine as you've tried to facilitate some of those conversations, some of them have been tough conversations. How do you cope personally with having to be like that pioneer, pushing that boundary and that edge on almost daily basis?
Yeah, so I think that's something that I have certainly come up against quite a bit in the role. So particularly in the area of advocacy, which is trying to, I guess, facilitate helpful discussion and conversations around the ways in which women can be engaged in decision making. So for me, that's been a real personal passion, is to be a part of a work that sees women really engaging more with decisions that are happening in the denomination. And I guess the difficulty with issues to do with, as soon as we start talking about men and women's roles and what women can and can't do in the church, very often that's a fairly divisive issue. It's a fairly emotional and a personal issue. People often have very, I guess, their own unique convictions around that. And at times it can be very fraught. So I think that's something I've really had to work on, is how to engage in discussions, particularly when I come up against maybe views that I don't necessarily agree with. And often I can be in situations where I can be very much in the minority in terms of being maybe one of the only women in the space. So I think a few things I found really helpful is just thinking about very intentionally how to stay engaged and how to stay connected with people when I'm in a conversation where I can feel my anxiety getting stirred and when I can feel my, I guess, the tension going up as maybe people are saying things that I disagree with or find difficult. I think my family systems training has actually been incredibly helpful. There's a lot
Yes, I
in family
imagine.
systems theory that is about really that idea of observing yourself and managing yourself and being really aware of how we work actually physiologically when our anxiety is stirred up relationally. So that's been really helpful to me in just being very observant, like slowing myself down, observing myself when I can feel, the heart start beating and the breath starting to go, and when I can actually feel that anxiety rise, is I very intentionally, even physically, I make a real attempt to just sit back in my seat calmly, to place my feet on the ground, to just very physically do things that are not very noticeable, but that actually remind me to slow down, remind me to observe myself. And another thing I found to be incredibly helpful is having a posture of curiosity. I find that being curious in the face of maybe someone's views that I find difficult or disagree with, if I can stay curious, I find that to be an amazing antidote for tension and anxiety. And if I can try to keep asking calm and thoughtful questions, I found just, a little practical tip is often to just be able to say to someone, oh, okay, I'm hearing what you're saying. Can you tell me a little bit more about what led you to that way of thinking? I found that to be just a helpful strategy at times to use, particularly if someone says something and my brain starts popping around and maybe I start feeling quite reactive to that. So I think those two things, just to be actually very observant of myself, to slow myself down physiologically, and then I think there's a lot in it around remembering that this is a person, that this is actually a precious person with their own story. There are things that have shaped them and their opinion, rather than reducing them down to the argument. I think that is a very tempting thing to do in conflict, is to reduce people, to almost dehumanize them, and to see them as the issue or the comment that's been made, rather than seeking to engage with them as a person and try to understand them more broadly. So those have been things that I've really tried to do. And that's really helped to bring down some of that tension, is trying to stay in contact and engage with people. So it's hard to do, but that has been just very practically what I tend to do in the midst of those kinds of conversations.
Yes. I can hear how you are uniquely gifted and placed into that role. Your legal background, your ability to articulate yourself and advocate, your counselling and social work background, helping you to utilise the very things you've described of being able to calm your own self and stay other person-centred in the conversation. All of those things just make you a wonderful fit for that role. And I, for one, as a woman in leadership, not in your denomination necessarily, but just generally speaking, am very glad that there is someone like you with your unique skills and training doing that. So on behalf of all the women who are listening, thank you.
That's
all
not
the
that grand, but it is, it does feel like a privilege to be in the role, and it certainly feels very meaningful to be able to speak into these issues. And I've been really grateful for that, and for the timing, that although they're, as I've said, a mixture of opinions, there's really some very excellent people that I get to work with, on both sides of the discussion. And so that's a great privilege, to be a part of a work that you really believe in and think is meaningful and important.
Yeah. Thanks so much for sharing some of those internal workings that help you when you're faced with some of those difficult conversations. I know that there's some really good gold strategies there we can all take away.
Yeah, just very simple, but I found them really quite helpful. Right. To just stay calm and present.
Yeah, calm and present. That sounds good. Thing that I know you and I can relate on, Anna, is over the years we've had a variety of leadership roles. And one of the common themes has been where we've had roles where we've had the opportunity to influence, but we haven't necessarily had the position. So it's what I call position power, which is more that hierarchy where you have the title, you have people reporting to you, the buck stops with you.
Yes.
In a lot of environments that you can still be an influence even when you don't have that sort of power, just by the way that you hold yourself, what I call the personal power, and also perhaps by expertise, if you have particular experience. I know that right now that's exactly where you are, and I'd love to hear a bit more about how you go about that. How do you influence people without necessarily having the position that has the final say?
Yeah. So I think that very much does describe the role that I'm in. And I do really feel a privilege there, in that I find myself in conversations that probably, so I've been in the role now 5 years. So you could probably say 5 years ago, there probably would not have been a woman in those discussions, or it would be more unlikely that there would have been. So I'm aware of that great opportunity and privilege to be in some of these discussions, and to be able to, speak my own thinking into that. But it's true that, I don't necessarily have a role of power in that. I'm certainly, it's interesting that the role I'm in some ways I rely on other people's power in some ways. And I guess what has been helpful, it's I guess working out how to connect with people, I think. Like, so again, when I started the role, I really didn't know very many people at all. And so that's, I think, over the last 5 years has been, I really think one of the biggest things I've done is built relationships, really, is gotten to know people and worked hard at sharing my own thinking and being clear on what I believe and my own convictions, but doing that in a way that builds relationships and doesn't cut them off, which again, I know is really hard, particularly with at times issues that are a little bit contentious. So that I think has been one of the things I've really sought to do, is to build networks, to find people who there's some synergy in the kinds of purposes we have and the values that we've got and the things that we would like to see change brought about in. And that's actually really rewarding. I've really enjoyed that, working alongside, they're probably mostly men actually. Like, I mean, I certainly work alongside women, but if I'm honest, it's actually the men that have got the power. And so finding men to partner with has actually been quite encouraging at times, and men who are willing to listen, and men who are willing to actually use their power in order to see the whole church benefit, in order to see actually women be included and benefit. So that's been very encouraging. So yeah, I would say one of the key ways is just through relationships. I think through gaining people's trust. Again, the issue of men and women is one where at times there is a lot of distrust. At times there is a bit of kind of an us and them mentality, a kind of, categorizing people. And so I think that's been one of my key aims, I guess, is to not form us and them relationships, but to use relationships helpfully to try to move forward and to do effective work. And that's been really good, to kind of to feel like, and I've noticed that in the last few years, it feels that people who maybe when I first started the role might have been a bit more skeptical about the work that we were doing, a bit more defensive. Certainly we've seen some walls come down in terms of people starting to feel that they can trust us, that the things that we're saying are not actually unreasonable, that they're actually healthy, and for the good of the denomination, for the good of the church, not things that are going to be divisive or unhelpful. So I think a lot of it really comes down to the ability to build relationships, to build trust, to share your thinking in ways that are clear and calm, and to kind of stay the course, like just to persist, I think, while not fleeing, not running away, not cutting off when you feel anxious or discouraged. I think that's really been one of the key ways that I've sought to influence, I guess, without necessarily having, a specific role that directly provides power to me.
I loved how you summed it up with saying that everyone benefits. When the women are involved too, when they're having a say, everyone benefits.
Yeah, and I think that's certainly been the language I've tried to use, like to say, look, this is not just doing a favour for women. This is not just a women's rights issue. This is actually the family of God. This is actually for the good of the church, that if we have women who are recognised with their gifting, who are invited to participate, that they're able to share their wisdom and their thinking, and they're invited to the table, it is just a richer, fuller, better outcome.
Beautifully summarised.
Yeah, so I think that's certainly the way I talk about it, the way I think about it, and it is a beautiful picture. And so I think that's partly how you influence. It's that kind of the persuasiveness of that being a really beautiful model. Is one that's been a good one to keep coming back to, is that great model of family and working together.
Well, thank you so much, Anna, for coming on. Unfortunately, we have run out of time, so we're going to need to finish there. But I do think that there's been a lot of people, I'm sure, who've been listening who have greatly benefited from hearing your insights and your wisdom. And I've certainly appreciated just the beautiful, careful and gentle nature in which you've described some of the sensitive work that you're going about. And so, thanks again.
Yeah, thank you for having me. And it's been a pleasure to be a part of meeting with you today.
Everyone, you've been listening to Leadership Mindsets with Catherine Martins. I hope this conversation has helped you. If it has, please share it with your friends or get in touch. Let us know how it has touched you. If you're interested in being on the show, please register your interest. Until next time, dig deep, challenge yourself, and choose a healthy mindset. Bye for now.